Hey, good day here, and just want to welcome everyone to our Ag Tech Tuesdays. And if you've joined us before, that's great. This week, we're going to really focus in on soybean production, and our title here is Pushing Soybean Productivity in Ohio. If you haven't joined us in the past, last week's presentation was about improving profitability in corn production. Um, you can see that on YouTube, along with all of our Ag Tech Tuesday recordings for the year. Just a quick refresher, the month of January really focused in on Precision University that we put on annually, and which were really tailored to having a shortened planting window and what we could do around planting and crop protection. For the month of February, we're really focusing in on our eFields research and results from that. And as mentioned, last week was really about corn. This week's about soybeans. So my name's John Fulton. I'm going to be your moderator here today. And to start off with just some real quick housekeeping. This session will be recorded. You will receive an email with that recording linked, which that recording will also, as I mentioned, post it to our YouTube channel. So feel free again to go back and watch prior episodes here for this year. In terms of questions, where we really ask you down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see some buttons, but if you got questions or comments along the way here today for our presenters, please just enter a question and we will get to those. Kind of an overview. We're going to have 5 speakers today. I'll introduce them here in a second, but at the end we'll have plenty of time for some discussion along with Q&A from you. But as you go along, please type those questions in and use your chat feature down at the bottom. Okay. We'll also be polling you guys occasionally. And so some poll questions to start off with here, and then throughout the session will come up, and so we ask that you take a second and answer those as well. So with that, just to kind of get in practice, if you go down to your chat feature, the question here just to start today is, do you feel fungicide seed treatments increase soybean yields? And can be just a yes or no answer. Again, put that down in your chat. Give you a second here to reply. But do you feel fungicide seed treatments increase soybean yields? All right, we're going to move right in here to our program. Prior to introducing our presenters, our Ag Tech tip of the week. If you have not done so already, would consider for your farm a mobile application or an app to support in-season field scouting, really for the benefit of economic and effective insect and disease management in your soybeans. There's several out there. It's just a great way to not only share information almost instantaneously, notes and images within the farm, but also think about apps that can communicate effectively between yourself and consultants out there. So I know here at Ohio State, we use a couple different ones. They're great resources, again, to collect data, collect scouting notes, drop pins, collect images. And again, as soon as we hit submit, those that aren't in the field can actually see that information. So again, just something to consider as a mobile application to support scouting. If you got questions on that, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to share some of our experiences and some of those that are out there. So the program today is really focused on our eField results. If you haven't got your book yet and would like a hard copy, please reach out to us. It's online. You can go.osu.edu/eFields to see the online version. Okay. And for our speakers today, really our soybean research starts on page 126 of eFields, and you're going to hear about some of those results here from our presenters. So first up, and talking about pushing soybean productivity in Ohio, is Dr. Lindsey. Dr. Lindsey's been here for a while as our soybean specialist. It's always good to hear from her. And she's going to be talking about the boots on the ground and really a statewide summary of at least what that I remember is 2 years of good quality data that they're bringing in. And so, Laura, we really excited to have you here today, and I'll turn it over to you.
I'm Laura Lindsey, the Soybean and Small Grain Extension Specialist at Ohio State. In 2019 and 2020, I participated in a multi-state project called Boots on the Ground. This project was led by researchers at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and University of Nebraska-Lincoln. This project involved on-farm trials across the North Central region and was funded by the North Central Soybean Research Program. To understand the research trial, I'm first going to back up and discuss another research project we participated in during the 2016 through 2018 growing season. During these years, soybean agronomists across the North Central region distributed a paper survey to farmers to document their soybean yield and management practices. The small box here shows where the data were collected. Each red dot represents one paper survey. These fields were then placed into a growing environment, shown by the colored map here. So, for example, Northern Ohio is mostly this dark green color. We call this Region 1, which is a similar growing environment to Western Michigan here. The rest of Ohio was mostly Region 2, which is this light green color, which includes central, southern Ohio, and then into Indiana. One of the goals of this data set was to examine factors that influenced soybean yield. Across the entire region, North Central region, the management factor that most influenced soybean yield was planting date. Box A here shows that Region 1, again, this is that northern area of Ohio. And here, yield loss was about a half a bushel per acre per day for each day soybeans were planted after the end of April. Box B here shows that central, southern portion of Ohio. Yield was reduced as soybeans were planted later, but by not as much. Here it was about 0.15 bushel per acre per day for each day soybeans were planted after the end of April. After planting date, other important factors included tillage, foliar fungicide and/or insecticide, and artificial drainage. We couldn't separate out the effect of the foliar fungicide and insecticide because these products are often tank mixed and applied together. So after we saw these trends come out of the paper survey, we wanted to take a closer look at these management practices on farm. So we established an on-farm trial that included planting date and foliar fungicide and insecticide application at the R3 grow stage. We weren't able easily to look at tillage and artificial drainage in on-farm research, so that's why we just focused on the planting date and then the foliar products in this study. The on-farm research trial had two treatments. The first we called improved. The improved treatment was to plant soybeans the end of April or early May at 130,000 seeds per acre, and then spray that foliar fungicide and foliar insecticide tank mixed at the R3 grow stage. Our second treatment was the standard system. The standard system was planted about 3 weeks later than the improved system at a higher rate of 160,000 seeds per acre. And then we had no foliar fungicide or foliar insecticide applied. If you want to see more details about the full protocol, it's on my website here, stepupsoy.osu.edu. This is a map that shows our locations in 2019. You can see here in Ohio, we had a very good east to west distribution across the state. These are the results for 2019 across the Midwest region or North Central region. The horizontal axis here shows yield of the reference or yield of the standard treatment. And the vertical axis here shows yield of the improved treatment. Again, the improved treatment was earlier planting, lower seeding rate, and that tank mix of foliar, fungicide, and insecticide at R3. This red line is the 1-to-1 line. So basically, research trials that were above this line meant yield was greater for the improved treatment. If any trials fell below the red line, it means that yield of that reference or standard treatment, later planting, higher seeding rate, and no foliar application yielded greater. I circled the Ohio locations here so they would stand out a little bit more. Overall, in Ohio in 2019, there was a yield advantage to that improved treatment. Sometimes it was about 5 bushels per acre. Other times here, this location in particular had a 20 bushel yield advantage with the improved system. At this location, there was a planting date effect for sure, but also they had frog eye leaf spot in their field. So I think that earlier planting combined with having the foliar fungicide application really helped increase soybean yield there. And we did have one location where our standard treatment, the later planting, had a higher yield. And sometimes this can happen, and it's very weather dependent. If soybeans are not receiving enough rainfall between the R3 and R5 growth stage, then yield can be impacted. However, across the entire Midwest, the improved management system had an average yield increase of 5 bushels per acre, which corresponded to an additional profit of $51 per acre. Again, this shows the 2019 results, and this red line is where the break-even point is. So trials that were to the right of this line meant there was a profitability associated with that improved management, which was the majority of the trials. If you're interested in participating in the trial this year, feel free to email me. My contact information is on this slide, or you can contact your county extension educator. For more information on the trial or the full research report, you can find that on my website here. I talk mostly about 2019 data summarized across the Midwest. Mary Griffith is going to get into more details about the 2020 trials conducted here in Ohio. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Really appreciate those comments. Really some good information that Dr. Lindsey shared with us. Like I mentioned, it's always good to hear from her, and especially what they're learning out of their lab. Next up is Mary Griffith. Mary is an A&R educator in Madison County, and kind of continue along the same lines here, really talk about some of the results she got from some local boots on the ground projects that she ran in 2020. So Mary, I'll turn it over to you to share with us today.
Hi, I'm Mary Griffith, Agriculture and Natural Resources Extension Educator in Madison County, Ohio. And today I'm going to talk about the local results that we saw in the Boots on the Ground soybean yield gap study that Laura Lindsey discussed. Laura summarized the results for the data collected in 2019 for all 7 states that are participating in this research. And I'm going to focus on 2 of the trials that we have in eFields for 2020 and review what we saw at these locations in this particular growing season. So as Laura mentioned, the study compares the performance of an enhanced management system for soybeans compared to a standard management system. And the enhanced management system is based on practices that were identified by soybean specialists in a previous study, including Laura, as having the biggest potential to increase yield and profit for a given climate and soil type for soybeans. So the 3 practices identified and include in the enhanced system are First of all, early planting date. So when we say early, we're talking about planting the end of April or May, compared to the standard system, which is going to be planted 3 weeks later, with the idea that soybean yields decrease about 1/2 bushel per day when planted after that early planting window. So the other thing is foliar fungicide and insecticide application at the R3 growth stage. The R3 stage is when pods are real little, about 3/16 of an inch long, and that's typically the recommended timing for fungicide and insecticide applications because this is the stage when pods are starting to develop and yield can really be impacted by disease or insect pressure if it's there at that time. And last, the enhanced system also has a lower seeding rate, around 130,000 seeds per acre compared to 160,000 seeds per acre in the standard system. So the idea here is that the higher seeding rate, again, will create a dense crop canopy that can allow diseases like white mold to really thrive in that environment with little airflow. In 2019, as Laura mentioned, we had 48 replicated trials in the 7-state area set up to compare the enhanced system to the managed or the standard system. In 2020, there were 53 trials, with 9 of those being in Ohio. And looking at all 53 trials in 2020, there was an average 3.2 bushel per acre yield increase using the standard or the enhanced management treatment compared to the standard. So the average yield increase seen in 2020 is smaller than the average yield increase that we saw in 2019. And it seems like a lot of that is due to 2019 having more favorable spring weather to allow earlier planting. In 2019, both the standard and enhanced trials were planted on average. Window for both systems could be a big part of the reduction in yield benefit that we saw in 2020 for the early planting. So now I want to take a look at what we saw in each of the trials that in 2 of the trials that we have published in eFields for this year. There's a 3rd trial in Auglaize County that's also included in eFields, but I'm only going to talk about the 2 that I was involved in with my neighboring counties in Clark County and Pickaway County. So the first trial I want to look at was in Clark County. The enhanced treatment was planted on May 13th, with the standard treatment planted 3 weeks later on June 3rd. Each treatment was harvested on November 3rd. And you can see that in April and May in this area, we had a lot of rain. So the planting dates were a little later than they would ideally be. So they did actually get some timely rains in July and August in this area. So there wasn't a lot of drought stress, and there also wasn't a lot of disease or insect pressure in this particular trial. In this trial, these are the results. The enhanced system did yield a little higher, but there was no statistical difference in those yields. So this could be partly because the planting date was a little bit on the later side for both systems due to the wet spring weather. And also with low disease and insect pressure, the fungicide and insecticide applications did not likely have much benefit at this location this year. For the Pickaway County trial, the enhanced system was planted nice and early on April 6th, with the standard treatment planted more like 5 weeks later on May 14th. And both treatments were harvested on October 9th. Now, if you look at the weather information, the red line shows the maximum temperature for the day and the blue line shows the minimum temperature. And the black vertical lines show our planting and harvest dates. So you might be able to see that after our nice early planting date of April 6th, there were actually 2 dates where we had a hard frost in this location before the standard system was planted. So we had a hard frost May 9th and May 12th. And of course, early planted plots couldn't really be replanted because the whole idea is that we wanted the early planting date. So the 2 hard frosts kind of hurt the enhanced system, and we'll see that in the results. You'll also notice that this site had very little precipitation throughout the whole growing season compared to the last site. At this site, they only had 8.5 inches total precipitation from April through September, compared to over 22 inches at the last location we looked at. So this site, both systems experienced some drought stress, and with such dry conditions, there was not a lot of disease and insect pressure. So there probably wasn't much of a benefit to the fungicide and insecticide application in the enhanced treatment here. Now, if you look at our results for this location, you'll see that the enhanced system started out pretty good. It was planted with a seeding rate of 125,000 seeds per acre. And in May, when we did the stand counts before those hard frosts, we had stand counts of 110,000 plants per acre. So that's pretty good emergence compared to our standard system, which is planted at 150,000 seeds per acre, and only had emergence of less than 92,000 plants per acre. So the hard frosts in May really messed up our early planted soybeans in the enhanced system, and then the dry growing conditions only added stress. So our enhanced system beans were struggling a little bit. Even the standard system was, because of the drought stress. But the added struggle of the frost really hit the enhanced system. On top of that, the fungicide and insecticide probably didn't add a lot of benefit to our enhanced system, since we really didn't see very much disease or insect pressure at this site this year. So looking at these results, you'll see that the standard system actually out-yielded the enhanced system in this trial, but there was no statistical difference in the results. So I want to thank our cooperators. I think that what these results show is the variation that we can see across growing seasons from 2019 to 2020, and also across locations within a single growing season. And so I think that what this highlights to me is the importance of replicating trials over time and over locations, so that we can have a better understanding of what we're seeing and why we're seeing it. So the more replications we have, the better we can understand what's going on, and the better we can make management recommendations that we can really rely on. So I want to thank our cooperators. I have just here listed the cooperators whose trials we have talked about here today. And I want to encourage anyone interested in this research or any other research question you see in eFields to participate as a cooperator, because again, the more cooperators we have, the better our information can be. You can get more information about this research at Laura Lindsey's website, which is stepupsoy.osu.edu. And here's my contact information. I'm happy to talk with anyone that's interested in knowing more about this. So thank you for being here today and for your attention.
Mary, thanks for not only sharing, but some good information that you learned there locally in Madison County. Next up is James Morris, again, another A&R educator. And he's going to be talking about foliar fertilizer application in soybeans. So James, I'll turn it over to you for today.
Hi, I'm James Morris, and I'm the Extension Educator for the Ohio State University Extension in Brown County. And I'm going to be continuing today's topic of pushing soybean productivity in Ohio. I'm going to go through a research plot that we did with the producer in Brown County in 2020. And hopefully that can provide you, of course, with some information about what we learned, but and most importantly, help you make some decisions for this upcoming year, and especially as it relates to foliar fertilizer applications on soybeans. So you got to see a little preview of the field that we were working with. And just to give you an idea, it's just an 8-acre sub portion of a much larger field. But now as you look at the map here, this is looking at our soil types, and we were really dealing with only 2 predominant soil types in this part of the field, and both were a silt loam. And we typically deal with these 2 types of silt loams here in Brown County, and this is a Claremont silt loam and a Westboro Schaefer silt loam. And you can also check by this next map that our plot layout, we really had both types of soil represented in our study. Now, we also had 2 treatments, but we had 3 replications of each of those treatments. Now, of course, the first treatment was our check or our control, where we had no foliar fertilizer applied at all. And then we also had 3 replications of those rows with 2 quarts per acre of a foliar fertilizer applied. And the analysis on that foliar fertilizer was actually 846 for our nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And then we had 0.1 for our boron, and then 0.2 for copper, 1 manganese, and also 1 zinc. So we had some micros along with some of our macronutrients as well mixed in with this application. So now that we've had a chance to take a look at the layout of this field, let's talk a little bit more about some of the work that went into it throughout the summer. And of course, we'll get to the results as well. But first, let's talk about the beginning. We really didn't get a chance to plant this when we anticipated. So it was planted a little bit later in the year. The spring just didn't allow us to get out there. And, you know, we were very upfront with the producer at the beginning. We said, hey, this is just a very small 8-acre patch of your crops. Let's just focus on getting your stuff done first. We'll get to ours when we get to it. And we did get to it, but it was later on June 15th of 2020 was our official plant date. So as you all know, as we get later into the year, of course, maybe we didn't plant till June, so our soybeans are getting a late start, but Mother Nature doesn't wait. So the weeds were still coming on pretty strong. And that was the kind of the downside here is we were really wanting to, as the producer was wanting to apply this with the herbicide at the same time. So we're only making one less pass across the field. And in order to do that, we really had to step up the time that we were going to be putting this foliar fertilizer on. So within just a little less than a month, we were back out there making the foliar fertilizer and the herbicide application as well. Now the herbicide was applied to all of the rows, but we did shut off, as we mentioned, the control versus the treated areas. So with this setback, it had us making this foliar fertilizer application a little earlier than we wanted to. But in order to make sure we had an effective weed control program, that was the decision we had to make for what was best for the producer. And for that part of it, for the weed control portion, it did pay off. And we did see a pretty clean field and did not have any yield effect in that matter for the plot. Now, as far as the yield results go, we'll get to that in just a minute. But as we mentioned, this put us back on our application a little bit. So most labels for foliar fertilizers will call for the R1 to R3 growth stage. So that beginning flower stage for the soybeans and that early reproductive stage. We made this application actually about the V5, V6. So we were just a little before that reproductive stage and flowering had not initiated yet. And again, we'll talk about some of those effects in just a minute, but I think that's important to note in this situation and in this trial. Now, you can see we made the applications here with a top air sprayer, a top air 110. And on this case, the sprayer booms were about 66 foot wide. So that set our trial width for us. And by the time we came around throughout the middle of the season, we still didn't see any observations health-wise or visually. We could tell what the yield was going to look like. So no visual observations were observed. And especially as we got into harvest at about November 6th is when we harvested this plot. We still didn't see any stand issues, any disease pressure, and of course, no weed pressure. And overall, just from a general observation over the field, we could not tell any differences between the treatments and replications. And again, as I mentioned, we did harvest this field on November 6th. And if you think back to the plot layout, we had our 3 replications across the field. And I also mentioned that the sprayer width was about 66 feet wide, and our header width on the combine was about 25 feet. So that gave us the opportunity to make 2 passes back and forth through each treatment and for a total harvest width of 50 feet. So it did leave us some buffer on each end to avoid any overlap on the application or any missed areas on the next start of the next treatment. And after we went down and back for our total 50-foot harvest width, we would bring it back and then weigh that out on a weigh wagon, take a moisture reading, and take the total sample weight. And after we did that for each of those trials, we took a combined average across all of them, and each one of those treatments ended up averaging out to be 59 bushels per acre. We really didn't see any difference, and even when we were in the combine and harvesting in the field, you see it being put in the weigh wagon, we didn't tell any difference in the quality of the grain or any of the size of the grain either. So a lot of the test weights were right around the same. And I think the moisture percentage was also right at 11.4% for each trial. So no difference in the moisture percentage either. So we didn't see the yield result that we typically want to see with an on-farm research plot, but I think this was a very valuable research plot in the fact that we learned so much about the use of these foliar fertilizers. You have to be able to make these management decisions if you plan on using them. What do you anticipate spring to look like? I know that's always a great question, but maybe don't ask that about the weather, ask that about yourself. What does your spring look like? Did you pick up more acreage this year, or do you have the employees on hand to be able to make these decisions? Okay, this foliar fertilizer needs to be applied on this recommended label growth stage. How difficult, you have to be honest with yourself, how difficult do you think it's going to be to make that application within that window? Our windows for the springs lately have been tighter than ever before, it seems. So make sure that you plan accordingly if you plan to use these in a system, because in this situation, we didn't see that yield benefit. So in the long term, or in the situation throughout the year, it negatively affected this producer's profitability. Now, luckily for this producer, it wasn't a whole lot, but if you spread that over a large amount of acreage and you can't make that deadline of when you want to make this application, it can be difficult. So it's just something to think about as you are debating whether or not you want to use a foliar fertilizer. You can look back at previous years that we have done eFields research, and we have still yet to see a large difference in yield, but it even becomes. Now that pretty much summarizes the research plot here we did in Brown County last year. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning, hopefully from today, you're able to walk away with some management decisions, or hopefully some information that will help you make these management decisions heading into the 2021 growing season. Now, while this information is not going to be the best for you to use to determine if it's going to have a yield benefit or not, I think this is a really good opportunity to think about if you're going to have the time to make these types of applications. For time for you to sit down and plan, what does your upcoming year look like? How thin are you spread? And how much time are you willing to set aside to make this application? And as I mentioned before, if you look back at the 2018, 2019 eFields reports, there are several other foliar fertilizer applications that were made during the timely manners, and you can check out those resources as well. And of course, for those of you here in Brown County, always reach out to the Brown County Extension Office, and I'll be happy to help you if you want to look at doing other research plots in the county for 2021. I know we already have a couple set up for this spring, so be sure to give us a call if you're interested.
Thanks, James. I know personally I get several questions on foliar fertilizer or feeding that crop during the season, and so it's really good to see some results and the work that you're doing in your county on that topic. Next up is Ken Ford. Ken Ford is an A&R educator, and really he's going to dive into a topic that's been pretty hot here, at least in Ohio, about seeding rates. And so, Ken, I'll turn it over to you and look forward to hearing what you have to say about seeding rate results.
Hello, I'm Ken Ford, and I'm the Ag and Natural Resource Educator here in Fayette County. And I'm here today to talk about our on-farm research program, and particularly the eFields program that we participated with the soybean seeding rate. And I want to give you some details about our project and some results that we were able to utilize, or we should be able to utilize from the results that we received. Just to give you some background, the soybean seeding rate here in Fayette County was planted on June 2nd. We harvested that on November 6th. The seed variety that we were able to use was Seed Consultants 734-1E, which is an Enlist product. We had 5 treatments. We placed those 5 treatments in 4 replications. 40-foot width was each replication, or excuse me, each treatment. And the soybeans were planted in a 15-inch rows. We planted this project on the Fayette County Research and Demonstration Farm located at the Fayette County Airport. This is also the location for the Southwest Ohio Corn Growers Annual Field Day, which we were unable to have in 2020, but we're hoping to progress forward and be able to have a successful field day in 2021. Prior to going to the field, There's some planning that needs to be done, and it's good to have everything listed out so that you know exactly what the planter settings need to be placed at. And I like to use the color coding system here so that there's no question once you get to the field. This is just a basic Excel sheet that able to utilize and come up with the planning width for each of our different seeding rates. We started with 60,000 kernels per acre, and we moved our way up to 200,000 seeds per acre, moving that up 40,000 kernels or 40,000 seeds per increment there. And all of these treatments were randomized using the OSU Plots app that has a randomizing tool on it there. Some things that with this plot area that we utilized, there was 11 acres in this field. We actually changed directions on the field from what it was previously planted last year in corn. And due to that and getting it leveled off so that it was actually in good shape for planting, we needed to work it an additional time. The only issue with that was that caused us to dry the ground out a lot farther than what we wanted to. So when we actually went to plant this field, it was extremely dry. As we begin with this project and look at some of the variables and some of the things that affected our outcome, one thing that you will notice from this particular plot and the time frame that it was planted, we actually planted this project on June 2nd. As you can see, we pretty much lost April and May due to rain. So we started the planting season most of April and most of May. There was just little windows of opportunities throughout those 2 months to get some things planted. We did have some corn planted in Fayette County in April, but very little. And I would say that the majority of our crops were planted probably that last week of May and first week of June here in Fayette County. Once we got the crop planted, we were able to get some rain. Between the rain being giving us a little bit of a crust, as well as the crop ground being so dry, I felt like we had some emergence issues, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But as we looked in June, we did get about 3.5 or a little over 3.5 inches of rain, which actually was good to get the crop started. Once we got it planted, I do feel like we had some emergence issues, possibly due to crusting. But as you can see here, this gives you a little illustration of the plant populations here and the density of the plants in the row. As we look here on the left side, you've got 60,000 seeds per acre versus 180,000 seeds per acre. So there's definitely a difference in the density. So at this stage in a project like this, you can definitely see a variation in your plants. And as you can see with the soybeans, relying on each other to germinate, that higher seed count per acre, they are a little bit taller than those that were pretty sparsely populated with this 60,000. And that's kind of a skewed number, as we will see from the chart here. When we look at our treatments, we tried to set up our treatments in 40,000 seed increments. We started as low as 60,000. But if you'll notice, when we did our actual stand counts, we had quite a variation from what we actually thought we planted and what we actually had seeds that actually grew. I don't know if this was a calibration issue with the planter. I'm not sure if it was a slight crusting issue once we got them planted and we got a few heavier rains. I don't know if that was part of it as well, but we did have all the way down the list. You can see that we had quite a difference between what we thought we were planning and what actually emerged. The differences here were very similar percentage. So I'm almost wondering if we didn't have a calibration issue in getting those seeds actually planted at that population that we desired. Once we got the plant started, got our growing season underway, you can see that Mother Nature decided to switch gears on us. And July, August, and September, we only ended up with 5.7 inches of rain. Here in September, you can see that less than an inch of rain at a very critical point in soybean production, as those pods are starting to fill and they're starting to develop. Not a lot of moisture there as we would have anticipated. But as we look at our results and break them down a little bit to determine, okay, what was our optimal seeding rate and what was our highest return above seed costs. I point out here our emergence. When you look at a emergence of 34,000 here, or actual plant population, that's pretty similar to a corn population. We did receive on this population 44 bushels per acre. Some guys would be happy with that on some years, but on land that should produce 50 to 70 bushels on any given year, that was definitely on the lower side. But as you look at our seeding rates here at 132,000 to 160,000, and if you also compare that to some of the other research projects that are in the eFields book for 2020, there's a lot of those that their highest returns above seed costs were around that 130 to 160,000 seeds per acre. As you can see here in our project, even though we were shooting for 180 to 200,000, I guess I'd look at the actual plants that emerged. So that's what we were dealing with. And we ended up with results here that was very similar to results from several of the other projects within the book here. And then we ended up with average yields on those at 63 and 65 bushels per acre, which was pretty average, above average in Fayette County for the fall of 2020. And then if you take that a step further and we look at our return above seed cost, in most of these projects, we're trying to show that 200,000 is almost too many seeds to be planting. But in this case, if we look at this and hopefully have a more accurate seed versus emergence number, that 160,000 here returned the most money per acre above seed costs. So results then came out, even though we were dry, even though things started out a little rough due to the extra working of the field and things like that. I still think we had results that were very comparable to other parts of the state. And this is something that you yourself will have to look at when you are evaluating seeding rates for your own farm. Some farms, based upon soil type and soil fertility, might be able to handle higher numbers of seeds per acre to receive a higher yield. But as costs continue to rise, seed costs is one thing that we're hoping that you can minimize to be able to maximize your yield. So hopefully you can reduce those costs to maximize your yield or your profit. So that's the project here in Fayette County. If you have any questions at any point, you can feel free to give me a call. My information's here. And I appreciate you guys tuning in today. And I hope that you guys have a safe rest of the winter and a very productive spring of 2021. Thanks.
Thanks, Ken. And I think when we think about being efficient, being productive at the farm, really diving into field by field analysis on seeding rates, especially in soybeans, is pretty important today. And then no better way than do some local on-farm research. If you haven't done any of those studies, please feel free to reach out to us, because there's really good studies to start with if you haven't been involved in some of the on-farm research, but have been real insightful as relates to soybean production in Ohio. Next up is John Barker. He's our A&R educator in Knox County. And John has an extensive background, not only in agronomy, but really precision ag as well. And so, again, probably the hottest topic that I know about, or at least that I've been getting a lot of questions on, is sulfur. And you know, we talk about rates and timing and such. So John, really excited to see what you have to share with us today. So I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, I'm John Barker, the Extension Educator for Agriculture in Knox County. Today I'm going to share with you the results from 2 of our eFields on-farm research plots this year. The plots we're going to look at were sulfur applications to soybeans. Here in Knox County, our farmers are hearing a lot about the need to add sulfur to their crops. Plants aren't getting as much sulfur from the environment, so adding sulfur could potentially increase their yield. So we want to take a look at that. This is actually the 3rd year we've had sulfur plots out here in Knox County, and today I'm going to share with you the results from those plots. On this slide, actually, I'm going to do this a little bit out of order, but the first thing I want to mention are our cooperators, Dave and Emily Mitchum. Just a huge shout out, a huge thank you to Dave and Emily for working with us on these plots and helping us complete this on-farm research. I've been in Knox County 30 years, and honestly, I've probably forgotten, lost track of how many different plots we've had out of the Mitchum's farms over the years, how many different research topics we've looked at, how many new technology demonstrations we've had out there with different precision ag components. We've flown our drones out there. We've crashed our drones out there and had to go walking through the field looking for them. So, and again, Dave and Emily are just super people to work with, and I can't thank them enough. Down in the bottom right-hand corner, for those of you guys with smart devices, you'll see a QR code down there. If you want to scan that QR code, that will take you to a video that the folks in Delaware County put together. Those guys do a fantastic job with these videos up there. But in this video, you'll hear Dave talking about the plots we have out on his farm. He also will discuss kind of the importance and what on-farm research means to him and his operations, and some comments his neighbors have shared with him about the importance of on-farm research here in Ohio. So if you get a chance, scan that QR code and take a look at that video. Okay, our plot this year, we had 2 plots out where we were looking at sulfur. The first plot here was planted on May 9th, harvested on September 26th. We had a seed consultants variety that we planted at about 145,000 in our initial seed drop. The second plot went in a couple of weeks later. We had a little bit of rainfall in there that slowed us down just a little bit. It was harvested in the middle of October. And again, a seed consultants variety in that plot as well, dropped at 145,000. The product that we chose to use was extract, and you can see the analysis there, and we used that at the recommended rate of 1 gallon per acre. Each one of these plots had 4 replications in there, and we're going to take a look at that data here in just a second. Before we do that, though, we want to talk a little bit about the weather where these plots were this year. And again, this is kind of a busy slide, so we're going to kind of break that down a little bit. The first thing we want to talk about is you'll see where it says planting date here towards the left-hand side, and that bar down there. And then over towards the right-hand side, you'll see the harvest date. And we really want to focus on the weather in the middle of that, the growing season weather in the middle. That's kind of where I'm really going to focus at right now. At the top of that graph, the red line are the high temperatures for the day that are recorded throughout that growing season. And you can see that we did have some high temperatures, and we had some days that bumped up there above 90. But we never had that prolonged period of high heat. You know, we never had any of those 100-degree days, and just never any high heat to kind of put those plants under stress. On the bottom side of that, the blue bar, that's the the average low temperatures that were recorded during the growing season. And you can see here, when it got a little chilly when we were planting, we're down there around in the 30s, a little cool down here around the end of May also. But for the most part, if you look at those low temperatures, we never really had those hot nights either. Those nights when it's up in the 80s in the evening and it doesn't cool down and it doesn't give that plant a chance to kind of regenerate. Our evenings kind of cooled down, gave those plants a breather, and really, as we looked at those plants throughout the year, we really never saw at least any visual stress to those plants from high temperatures. Down on the bottom is the rainfall data, and the one thing that stands out to me there maybe is the consistency a little bit of the rainfall that we had. If you've listened to our climate guide, Dr. Aaron Wilson, talk about these big, huge weather events that we're having here in Ohio, and we have our share of them up here as well. But out where our plots were this year, we didn't have those big 2 and 3 inch rains throughout the growing season. But what we did have, we had some fairly consistent, nice, 1 inch rains through here. We had some 1/2 inch rains in here also. And those were kind of consistent throughout the growing season. We got to the end of June, the first part of July, and we had a little bit of a wet spot in here, but right in the middle of that, we did have a few tenths to kind of break that up a little bit. And the same thing in August. We went through a little bit of a dry spell here, but again, we had close to a 1/2 inch in the middle of that to kind of break that up and give those plants a chance to grab some of that moisture. And again, as we walk out there and we walk through those plots, never really any visible stress from the weather-related stress in there. And you can see the rainfall totals here at the bottom of that slide. Just overall, just not too bad of a growing season for us in Knox County. The rainfall was pretty timely. We had excellent weed control. We had some slight insect feeding and really no observable disease pressure around these plots at all. We did have a portion of the county that was pretty dry up in the northeast corner, but down in the southern part of the county where these plots were, we just had a pretty good growing season. If we want to talk about the specifics of these plots now, you can see the yield in the first plot, about 81 bushel the acre where we had the treatment. Our control was about 76. There was about a little over about a 4.7 bushel difference in yield between the treatment and the control. That was a statistically significant yield difference. When we looked at the economics of this, we used a cash harvest price at a local co-op of $10.23 on the day I called, and we used on-farm costs for the treatment of $12.63, and we also charged $8 as an application charge. And when you do all the math on that, we had on that first plot we had about a $27.50 positive net return to the sulfur. On the second plot, we had similar results. We had about a little over a 3 bushel difference in yield. Those yields were not statistically different. We used the same cash price and the same expenses, and we ended up with a positive net return to sulfur of $12.62. The thing that stands out to me in these plots this year, if you look at the numbers, we had expenses of just a little over $20 to the acre. This year's cash price of about $10 to the acre. So, rough math there is if you were going to break even with this treatment this year, you had to have about a 2 bushel yield increase to be able to break even. And as Dave and I talk about this plot, and if you watch a video, you'll hear Dave say this, and I've heard him say this 100 times over the years, you don't want to spend $1 to make $1. If you're going to do these kind of treatments, you have to have a positive net return. If you're looking at where you're going to have that capital outlay, where you're going to use your economic resources in your fields this year, there needs to be a consistent positive net return to these kind of treatments. And that leads me really into my next slide here, and it's caution. This is the third year that we've had sulfur plots out in Knox County. This is the first year that it's ever showed a positive net return. Most of the years when we've walked out and walked through these plots and looked at them, you can see a difference in color where the sulfur's been applied. Usually those plants are a little bit greener looking. And you can see that with the eye, you can see that with the imagery we take from our drones. But as we take that to yield, we've never seen the yield increase. We've never had a positive net return to sulfur before this year. this year for whatever the reason we did have, and that's good, but it needs to be consistent. I know there's the folks in Delaware County, they had sulfur plots out this year. They didn't have that positive net return. And if you look back in other eFields reports, you'll see from past years, there's been some sulfur plots in there, some sulfur data in there, but again, you don't see the consistent economic net returns that we really want to see to be able to do this on a large scale and to be able to do this over every acre of our farm. If you have any questions, I've included my contact information here, my email and my phone number. Please feel free to reach out and give me a call or text. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Excuse me. Thank you and have a good day.
Well, thanks, John, and that's good information that you shared, and I want to say thanks to all of our speakers here before we move into our next stage here, and that's really getting to some of your questions and having some discussions on these topics and possibly more. So just again, thanks to all of our speakers, and let's go ahead and take our first question for the day.